Story 1. In 1996, I had just dropped out of university and was moving back to my parents' house. My tail was firmly between my legs. I had almost no money and no job prospects. Basically, I was screwed. I had an old Jeep Comanche with all my belongings in the back and 200 miles to go. I borrowed $20 from a friend for gas and started the trip. 30 miles from home, I ran on empty. I pulled into a gas station and rest stop and cried for a minute in my truck. I needed $5 for gas to make it the rest of the way and had nothing. There was no way I could call my dad and ask for help. He was already so disappointed. After a minute, I started searching around my truck for change. Anything. I opened the glove box and found paper loyalty bucks for a gas station I had never used. It turned out to be the exact gas station where I was stopped. I had $4.70 in loyalty bucks. I found another $2 in change, put $6 in the gas tank, and bought a Coke. I made it home. 20 years later, I had sorted my life out and become a lawyer. The gas station hired me as their outside counsel, and I got to tell the story to the president of the company. Story 2. I was too young to remember this, but my mother always told the story. When I was barely able to speak, I was sitting on the floor playing with toys with my mother when I said, "When I was in heaven, I met a woman who said you'd be the perfect mommy for me. I believed I had been in heaven before I was born, and that an angel looked at me and chose the mother I would have." My mother asked me to describe the woman, and I described her great-grandmother perfectly, down to the eye color. I had never met or seen a picture of her. Story 3. As a child visiting my grandma's house, I would always wave to Ken next door when I left. He was always sitting in the bay window looking out at the sea. He lived on the North Sea coast in Hartlepool, United Kingdom. We never really spoke, just a little wave before I got into the car. One time, as I was leaving my grand's house, my mum stopped at the door to talk to my gran. I headed down the steps toward the gate. I turned back and saw Ken in the window, smiling as usual and waving at me. I waved back. He stood up, gave me a thumbs up, and walked to the back of the room. My mum came down the steps and asked, "Who are you waving at?" I replied, "Ken." To this day, I can remember my mum's face. She just went white and said nothing. A few weeks later, she told me that Ken had died a few days before our visit to my grand's. I don't believe in ghosts, but I know I saw him. I can still picture his gray sweater with light stripes, him waving and getting up out of his chair. There was no one else in his house. He lived alone. Brains are weird. I had an update from my mum about seeing Ken. I reminded her of the incident and asked what she remembered. She replied, "I'm sure you saw him too. I know there's someone in our house. Ashley, Mum's cat, sees them on the stairs at the same time every night if we are in the lounge. I always say hello. It definitely doesn't feel like a threatening presence." So it turns out there isn't just Ken next door. There's someone in my mum's house too. Maybe it's my gran. Once the coronavirus is over, I'll have to stay over a few nights to see for myself. Story 4. When I was about 12 years old, I went to Lake Tahoe with my friend and his parents, who had a condo in Incline Village. One day we were walking to the bowling alley and crossed a street in a crosswalk. Right before we reached the curb, a car came very close to hitting us. Suddenly we were both on the curb, as if lifted a few feet. We looked at each other in surprise. "Did you jump?" "No, did you?" "No." We spent the next hour dumbfounded. It did not feel like a shove or any use of force. We were in the street, then we were not. Story 5. When I was 10 years old, I did not want to go to school one day. I faked a stomachache so my grandmother would let me stay home. I have always been a bad liar, so my grandmother tried to call my bluff. She told me that if I was too sick for school, she would schedule me a doctor's appointment. 3 hours later, I was rushed into emergency surgery. My fake illness was actually appendicitis, and it was so inflamed that if I had not come in that day, my appendix would have ruptured, potentially killing me. I felt completely fine that day, yet faking an illness saved my life. Story 6. Once, my mom and I were driving to Las Vegas from Santa Clarita. We were just passing Barstow on Interstate 15. It was about high noon and very hot. Not a cloud in the sky. She had a Lexus with a touchscreen dashboard that could play digital versatile discs while driving. We were on a long stretch of road with lots of space between cars. One minute we saw nothing ahead and then, suddenly, a woman was walking across the highway right in front of our vehicle. My mom swerved behind her and barely missed her. She pulled off to the shoulder. We looked behind us and saw the woman walk all the way across the highway, including the westbound lanes. Then she turned around and walked across again, nearly getting hit each time by unsuspecting oncoming cars. At one point, a semi-truck nearly struck her head-on, missing her by one step. Each step she took was steady and confident, looking ahead and showing no concern for traffic. She was barefoot, walking on the scorching asphalt with no sense of urgency. My mom called 911 and was directed to Highway Patrol. They said they had received numerous reports and were on their way. After hanging up, my mom decided to slowly reverse down the shoulder to get a better look and see if the woman was okay. As we reached a spot behind her, she had crossed the highway and was now in front of our vehicle. This part one will never forget. The woman slowly turned her head, looked at us, and began walking steadily toward our car. She wore a white nightgown. Her skin was pale and dry, her hair white, and her eyes the palest bluish gray I have ever seen. She was barefoot and almost looked like a Walking Dead version of Rose Dawson from Titanic. I was in the passenger seat on the shoulder. When my mom made eye contact with the woman froze, absolutely shutting down. She walked so close to my door that I could see her eyes meet mine. It seemed as if she were blind and lifeless. Yet she appeared to see not only me but into and through me, into my soul. I went cold immediately. She reached for my door handle. I screamed at my mom to floor the gas. Without hesitation she did, and we sped away. Through the rear window I saw the woman watch us leave, then continue across the road. A mile down the highway we contacted Highway Patrol to report what had happened, but they said they had no reports of a woman crossing the highway. My mom still does not remember the time between when we reversed and when we drove off. I have no idea what happened that day except for what I witnessed and experienced. Story 7. I was changing pants in my room before work and took off my belt. After putting on another pair of pants, I went to put the belt back on, but it was gone. No one else was in the room, and I spent about 10 minutes looking for it after simply setting it on the floor. It has been 10 years, and I have never seen that belt again. Story 8. I will never forget witnessing this moment. In my physics general education class last year, we were split into groups for a lab. A student at another table yelled, extended his arms, and fell headfirst off his chair. The instant between his yell and hitting the floor, a beeping started in the room, followed by an announcement. An emergency is happening in your building. Please evacuate at the nearest exit. The lights began flashing. He was having a seizure on the floor, so everyone focused on getting him help. A campus police officer came in and told us the other science buildings had already evacuated because of the fire alarm. Most of us left to give space to those helping him. Outside, we were baffled by the coinciding events. Could the flashing alarm have triggered epilepsy? No, he was already on the floor before the lights came on. Could a sensor on him have alerted because his body was in distress? No, it was his first seizure. Reading this might sound anticlimactic, but witnessing it and piecing together what was happening in real time was eerie. In short, I watched a student have his first, frightening seizure a millisecond before the building fire alarm went off. Story 9. In 2008, a car traveling 50 to 60 kilometers per hour struck both of my knees. It was completely my fault because I wasn't paying attention when I crossed the road. Not only did I not suffer any broken bones, I didn't even fall, although I did flinch a lot. My knees and leg hurt for about 2 days. I still can't explain how a relatively fast car hit me and I ended up with barely more than a couple of bruises. Story 10. I am a firefighter. We got a call for an overdose around 3 a.m. in a rough part of our district in the middle of winter. The patient was gone. Her dealer or whoever found her when he dropped some drugs. As we were packing up our equipment in an absolutely trashed mobile home, I heard something down the hall say, "Lights?" I asked my partner if he had said anything. It was just the two of us cleaning up and he said no. I walked to the far end of the trailer where I had heard it and shined my flashlight. I saw a reflection in a window. Outside was a small tool shed with a flickering light, which piqued my interest, so my partner and I went out there. We heard crying and noticed the door was padlocked. We cut the lock and found a 6-year-old girl inside. She said her mother puts her in there when she gets mad. She said she got scared when she heard the sirens and did not know what to do. To this day, I have no idea where the voice came from, but I will take the win on it. Afterward, my partner and I took her to the closest children's hospital, wrote our report, and ate chips and a sandwich we had taken from the lounge while they called a social worker. She was a very sweet girl. The voice was not a little girl's voice. I was certain it was my partner because it sounded like a man's voice. Sorry for the earlier misuse of peaked. I was between calls early in the morning and grammar is not a defining characteristic of mine. Thanks for reading. Hug your children a little tighter tonight. Story 11. I was at a friend's house. My friend was in the garage working on a dirt bike. The driveway was empty because his parents had left a while earlier. I went inside to grab a soda but decided to look for his cat, whom I had not seen all day. I walked into the office, and as I called her name, a deep male voice said meow right in my right ear. I jumped and ran around the main floor looking for who had said that, but I did not find anyone. Story 12. I once shut my ear in a car door. I have no idea how. I have tried to recreate it and cannot. My goodness, that hurt. Story 13. This is strange to me because it happened so long ago that I must be remembering things incorrectly. I was a young kid at the grocery store and saw a toy helicopter about the size of a Hot Wheels car that I wanted. I did not buy it, but the memory stuck with me. A few nights later, I dreamed I was playing with the helicopter. I realized I was dreaming and foolishly thought that if I put it under my pillow, it would still be there when I woke up. When I woke up, I eagerly checked under the pillow and, to my surprise, it was right where I had seen it in the dream. As a child, I was not surprised then, but years later, I have no idea how the toy helicopter actually got under the pillow. Story 14. About 5 years ago, I was out with 2 friends. At the time, this group liked to party hard, as did I. We were a few years out of college and living in a resort town. That night, we went out to dinner and then to a bar. We all did a round of shots when we arrived. Immediately after the shot, I felt like I needed to throw up. It was odd because I had not drunk much at dinner and I was very accustomed to taking shots. This was a very bizarre reaction for me. One of the friends had driven me there, but I immediately decided I needed to leave, so I took a taxi home and felt completely fine when I arrived. I would usually have been out until 4 or 5 a.m., but I was home by 11 p.m. I watched television and went to bed, but the whole night I had a strange feeling. I woke up the next morning to find that the 2 girls I had been with had been in a car accident. The driver was drunk and texting, and she hit a huge telephone pole. The pole fell onto the car, almost splitting it in half. By the grace of God, neither of them was harmed, but if someone had been sitting in the back seat, they could have been killed. I am certain I would have gotten into that car and likely would have been sitting in that seat. I do not tolerate drinking and driving or anyone who attempts to drive while impaired. Story 15. One morning I woke up and noticed my camera on top of the sofa opposite my bed. I knew I had not put it there because it was a very expensive camera and it could easily fall from that spot. I had placed it in my cabinet. I went over, picked it up, turned it on, and viewed the photos. There were hundreds of photos of me sleeping, all seemingly taken from the back of the sofa. I was so frightened I could not stop crying. I lived alone. The photos were taken in a quick snap mode, where the camera takes approximately 1 photo per second. I later realized the camera did not even have a quick snap setting, so technically it was impossible for the camera to take those photos. The timestamps suggest all photos were taken between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. I have never figured out what happened, how the camera got to the sofa, or how a camera with no quick snap could take those photos, but I still have a USB flash drive with the images and it still scares me. I am safe. This happened several years ago. I now live with my partner, we have several dogs, and a very good home security system. There was no sign of forced entry to my home. I owned the home, and I had the locks changed when I moved in because I felt uneasy about living alone. I did go to the police. They did not care and said it was probably a friend playing a prank. My mum had a key to the house. This thread actually jogged my memory about something I had forgotten. Approximately 12 months before the camera incident, I received a typed letter in my post office box addressed directly to me saying that if I did not agree to meet the sender, they would kill me while I slept. I thought it was a stupid joke because I could not think of anyone who would want me to meet them, so I threw the letter away and did not tell anyone. I received 3 or 4 of those threatening letters demanding a response but offering no way to reply or any hint about who it was from. The sender wrote as if I should know who they were, but I did not. One letter provided a time and place to meet, but I did not attend. That was the final letter. I moved house and changed my postal address shortly after the camera incident. I am alive now, so they never acted on the threats. Story 16. I hit a patch of black ice in the dark while driving 60 miles per hour down the highway. At the time, I was driving a 1-ton cargo van. It hit the guardrail and flipped. Not only did I walk away without a scratch, but the van was drivable and I was only 30 minutes late to work. Story 17. When I was in elementary school, I had the same dream every weekend. I would fall asleep on Saturday, wake in the middle of the night on Sunday, and vomit. The dream contained nothing but a jumble of random numbers everywhere. I never understood why the same dream happened on the same night each week, and I always vomited. I had no signs of illness before or after. I still think about it and wonder what it meant or whether it was just a strange coincidence. Has anyone else experienced this? Story 18. I have a vivid memory of being at the Statue of Liberty as a child, sitting on my father's shoulders and seeing the skyline of New York City. I remember what we ate for lunch that day and the ferry we took. I have always thought about this memory and talked about it, but my family denies I ever went to New York City. I did not visit New York City for the first time until I was 23, but when I finally went, I remembered everything exactly as it had been when I was there with my father. Story 19. My girlfriend got out of the shower and called me into the bathroom to show me the mirror. There was a very strange, distinct handprint on the mirror. I live alone, and she is the only adult who has been to my house in about 2 years. We each placed our handprints on either side of the mystery print for comparison, and neither looks anything like it. I still have no idea how it got there. To address a few points, I have lived in this house for over a decade. The mirror is not newly installed. The mirror is cleaned regularly. I have taken many showers and fogged the mirror and have never seen anything like this. The previous owner of the house died here. A few years earlier, I was watching my neighbor's 5-year-old. She was eating at the kitchen table and asked, "Who was that lady that just went upstairs?" There was no lady or any other person in the house. Story 20. I have 3 that really stand out to me, and as far as explainability, I can't explain any of them, but one is the winner when it comes to scaring the shit out of me. They all involve doors. 1. In my teenage years, I lived in a townhome owned by my then stepdad, who freely admitted he thought the place was haunted. He was self-employed as a sound equipment installer and often came and went during the day, and my mom worked 9 to 5 at a law firm. It was summer break, but I wasn't driving yet. I spent a lot of time outside, and this was before everyone had a cell phone, so I would often take our cordless home phone outside with me. I went outside one day and realized I had forgotten the phone. When I tried to go back inside to get it, the door was locked. Not the handle, which I might have written off as something I accidentally did on my way out, but the deadbolt. The handle turned freely, but the deadbolt was engaged. The deadbolt requires a key to lock from the outside, which I did not have. I stood there dumbfounded for a few minutes. Nobody else was home, and the only other entrance to the house was a set of sliding doors in the basement that were always locked. What the fuck just happened? I kept trying to open it like an idiot for a while before finally resigning myself to borrowing the neighbor's phone and calling my stepdad. He was in town and, after asking me if I was sure 1,000 times, came by to unlock the door. I will never forget him saying, "Yep, the deadbolt was completely thrown. I can't explain that." I spent the rest of the afternoon inside trying to recreate the situation. I slammed the door shut so many times in an attempt to get the deadbolt to wobble and lock itself, but it never did, and honestly I didn't expect it to. 2. Same townhouse. I was now driving and often stayed late after school because I was in theater and had practices. One afternoon I had about 30 minutes between class and practice and drove home to get a snack. When I got there, my mom was at work and my stepdad's van was gone, so I assumed he was not home. The door was locked. In that house, when you walk in, the kitchen is on the left, my bedroom is on the right, and the middle has a staircase going downstairs. I unlocked the door, came inside, and turned into the kitchen with my back to the staircase. As I was making a sandwich, I heard someone downstairs. I turned back around and the staircase door was open, the stairwell light was on, and someone was clearly downstairs. At the time I thought, wasn't that door closed when I got here? I also rationalized. My stepdad's van was a cargo van and it wasn't uncommon for someone to borrow it to haul things. So I assumed he was home, his van was borrowed, and I went to the top of the stairs. I stood there, looking down the stairs, eating my sandwich, and I almost said something. It was almost out of my mouth, but something stopped me. I still don't know why I didn't yell, "Hi, Jay," down the stairs. Instead, I turned around and left, and I left the door unlocked because he was home, right? When I got back from practice, my mom was mad at me because Jay said he came home around 5 p.m. to an unlocked house. He had a lot of expensive equipment in the basement. I was always supposed to lock the door. I tried telling her what I had seen. He was home at 4. She said he wasn't. I swore he was. Something was home. My brother believed me, but my mom never did. 3. I lived in a shitty trailer in my early 20s when I was poor with 2 young kids. It had 2 bedrooms, which I had given to the kids, and I slept on the couch in the living room, which was in direct line of sight to the front door. I put the kids to bed around 9 p.m., and I always locked the door. Always. I still to this day clearly remember locking both the handle and the deadbolt and checking to make sure it was fully locked before taking a shower. Eventually I fell asleep. I woke up suddenly around 3 a.m. on high alert. As my eyes cleared and I started thinking sensibly, I realized I was staring into the street. My front door was wide open, not a little ajar or cracked, but fully open at about a 90-degree angle. I also had a glass storm door that was fully closed and latched, blocking any wind we might have had, which we did not have anyway. I got up and walked to the door to close it, and that's when I lost my shit. The deadbolt was still in the locked position. It was fully turned to lock, sticking out into the living room for everyone to see. Have you ever had those moments where you swear there's ice in your veins? That was it for me. I've never been that scared in my life. With a closed door, you can't even turn the deadbolt to fully locked without it being lined up in the door jamb properly. I knew I had locked that door, and yet there it was, staring me in the face. I didn't sleep without the lights on for a week. Story 21. When I was in primary school, in year 1 or 2, the cafeteria had cups filled with milk at every lunch. The cups were red, green, and blue, but there was only one yellow cup. Everyone would fight to get the yellow cup as if it were the Holy Grail, and it had been that way for years. One night I dreamed that the cafeteria had received more yellow cups. And lo and behold, the next day there were hundreds of yellow cups. Story 22. I had a sleep paralysis nightmare when I was a child, where I saw a red-eyed dark figure standing in the doorway. It has stayed with me, and I have called him the boogeyman ever since. One day I was browsing Reddit and someone posted a painting of their sleep paralysis demon. The picture matched my dream exactly. Several people commented that they had seen the same creature. Thinking about it still makes me uneasy. Story 23. I have very vivid, intense dreams. One night when I was about 13 or 14, I dreamed of a safari hunting Tyrannosaurus Rex, and we had to save a golden idol from pirates in the jungle. Strange dream, but during it, while running, everything suddenly stopped. I saw another version of myself and I said, "Amethystia, wake up. Everything is about to shake and you are in danger. Wake up." I woke instantly and sat up, confused. Roughly 15 seconds later, my boxer puppy woke and started whimpering and whining, and the rabbit I had started hopping in his cage. Seconds later, an earthquake occurred. It was not very big, but strong enough to knock several photos and my shelf down. This specific shelf was mounted above my head. It was made of very thick wood and held a collection of random prized items, including a quart jar filled with sand and shells, several large books, a heavy statuette, and so on. It was quite heavy. When it fell directly onto my pillow where my head had been a moment before. I had never felt an earthquake and lived in a northern Midwestern state that rarely has noticeable earthquakes. I have had other dreams since that foreshadowed events, but that was the only one that happened immediately after. It still gives me chills. Story 24. Both of my lungs collapsed at the same time, each more than 50% collapsed, and I was walking around acting perfectly normal until I went to the emergency room for bubbling sounds in my chest. None of the doctors could figure out why this had happened. They did not know how I could be up and walking around and laughing. For clarification, I am a 5'7" thin woman. I have heard spontaneous pneumothorax is very common in tall, thin men. Yes, it was a bilateral pneumothorax and the doctors could not determine the cause. I had 4 more spontaneous pneumothorax episodes over the next 2 years. I was 19 to 21 years old at the time. I am 26 years old now. The doctors performed pleurodesis to stop the recurrences, and it has not happened since. Story 25. When I was in 3rd grade, I lost a jacket at a roller rink. I had a lucky rabbit's foot in the pocket that I bought at the skate shop inside. A few months later, my mother, who had been adopted, found her birth mother and half-sister. When I first visited my newly found aunt, she said she had a jacket that might fit me. It was my jacket with the rabbit's foot still in the pocket. Story 26. When I was in college, a drunk man fell from a 3rd-floor balcony, got up, and walked away as if it were nothing. It was one of the weirdest or most freakish things I have ever seen. Note: this occurred at the University of Southern California around 2009. Story 27. One night on Reddit, I read a thread where the original poster hallucinated strange things until a commenter suggested checking for a carbon monoxide leak. The commenter probably saved his life. I went to bed thinking that I had not checked whether my new house's smoke alarms also detected carbon monoxide and that I would check in the morning. Around 6 in the morning, my wife and I woke to our fire alarms shrieking while a recorded voice announced that carbon monoxide had been detected. We grabbed the baby and the dog, piled into the car in the driveway, and called the fire department. After testing, they told us no carbon monoxide was present, but that alarms can behave unpredictably when their batteries are low. This was about 5 years after moving into a newly constructed house, so I had been negligent in checking. Despite the logical explanation and an improbable coincidence, I ended up spending a lot of money on several Nest Protect units so I would at least receive a phone notification when an alarm's batteries were low. Story 28. I was walking between bars in a college town when something hit me in the back. I turned around and saw a cue ball rolling down the sidewalk. I spent the next 5 minutes walking up and down the street trying to figure out who threw it or what had happened. I never found anyone, and I still have the cue ball. Story 29. My dad owned a small garden shop, so I stayed behind the checkout after school until the shop closed. One evening, I saw a tall man dressed all in black, like a trench coat, walk past my dad and smile at me before going into a staff-only area. I jumped up to stop him, even though I was 7. The back area was filled with new shipments. I turned the corner, but nobody was there. There was nowhere he could have gone. I asked my dad to check the closed-circuit television after closing, but it only showed me jumping up and running out of frame. It was unsettling. I never felt comfortable there again. Story 30. I turned to the other person in the room, whom I barely knew, and said that my sister was getting engaged at that moment, without intending to speak. He politely asked why I had said that, and I shook my head and said I did not know. A few days later, I found out that, at that exact moment on the other side of the world, she had said yes to Mr. Right. I had not even known she was dating. Story 31. Several times a year, I suddenly get a thought that it has been a long time, usually months, since I last spoke with a particular friend or relative, and then I receive a call or an email from that person within a few hours. I can't explain it. I never tell them because I fear losing this strange ability. Does anyone else experience this? Story 32. I swear my 4-year-old can read my mind. We seem to be on the same wavelength. I will randomly think of a specific food, for example ice cream, which we rarely have, and he asks, "Can we get ice cream?" Or I will be thinking about my mom and he will ask, "Can we go to grandma's?" Story 33. When I was younger, we lived in a 110-year-old Victorian house. Everyone noticed strange things. I was home alone organizing the silverware. I dropped a fork onto the table. It bounced once and flew horizontally into the wall, as if someone had slapped it. I still have no idea how something can be dropped straight down and then launch 5 feet horizontally. When my parents first bought the house, they turned off all the lights. The house had 5 floors if you count the basement and the attic. My mother turned off the top 2 floors, my father turned off the bottom floors, and they met in the middle, went to the first floor, left, got to the car, and noticed not only was the 3rd floor light on, but the blinds were up. We had a seesaw in the attic. My mother turned on the light and saw it violently going up and down. I was in the basement and felt a hand brush down my back. I jumped, turned, and saw no one there. I convinced myself it was just my shirt moving weirdly. As I went up the steps, I heard giggling. When I was older, I was sitting on the couch and heard my dad shout, "What the? Watch out." Right before a framed puzzle fell on me. My dad said he had seen it lift itself off the hook. We had a Mastiff, a Rottweiler, and a German Shepherd. They refused to go into the attic. Our entrance had 2 sets of doors. An outer door, then a small foyer, then the inner doors. We never locked those inner doors because they had 2 large bolts that went into the floor and a 3rd bolt that held the 2 doors together. Locking them from the outside was very difficult. You could only do it from the inside with considerable force. One day we came home and the inner doors were locked with all 3 bolts. In other words, our completely sealed house was locked from the inside. My mother panicked, grabbed us, and ran to a payphone to call the police because if that door was locked, then someone had to be in the house unless they had left via a 2nd or 3rd-story window. 3 police cars came. They unlocked the door with my mother's key, and they swept every inch of the house, even sending 1 officer into the crawl space. Nothing. My mother's gold necklace was lying on the table and all the windows were locked. A family friend who was a police officer and one of my uncles, also a police officer, came to spend the night. The next morning everyone was up and my uncle went to leave, only to find the inner doors locked from the inside again. We removed those locks that same day. The Mastiff was lying next to me while I was watching television. Suddenly he jumped up and backed into me, growling and snarling while staring up the steps. The other 2 dogs ran in and immediately stopped, their ears back and the hair along their necks raised. This went on for several minutes. Our German Shepherd started inching toward the stairs and did a little lunge, nipping at the air and baring his teeth. About 5 seconds later, I heard what sounded like someone sprinting up the steps from the landing to the 2nd floor and then to the 3rd. I called my mother from the house phone. While on the line, I heard what I can only describe as a wail from the 3rd floor. Years later, after my parents divorced, I was with my dad for the weekend and helped him clean the 3rd floor. We put the toys in a large toy chest from the closet where they had been. While we were brushing our teeth, I went pale. I was hearing something, so I shut off the water and asked my dad to listen. We were both completely quiet. The sound started again, a clink, clink with a bit of rhythm. At first I couldn't place it, then I said, "Dad, I think that's the xylophone." We went upstairs and the toy chest was open and the xylophone was on the floor. Story 34. When I was 10, I had a radio and a beanbag chair in my room. As I was starting to fall asleep, the radio suddenly changed channels several times, and then I heard the beanbag chair slowly fold in on itself, making the sound it would make if someone were to sit in it. I am not sure what caused this, but it certainly freaked me out. Story 35. When I was a kid, I slept with my bedroom door open because my cat liked to cuddle me. Our hallway was round, and I could see the bathroom door and my parents' bedroom door, though it was dark. I also slept with my lights dimmed. One night I could not sleep. I called out for my mom and saw her standing near my doorway, turned away from me, with her hand on her face and her hair draped. I knew it was her because she slept in a big purple t-shirt, but she was completely still. I was wide awake. I might have been watching television on the Disney Channel around 3 a.m. When I called out to her, she did not move at all. Then she was gone. I started freaking out and calling for her. And then I heard my parents' bedroom door open and close and my mom rushed to my aid. I think she either slept with me that night or I stayed up all night watching television to pacify myself. After that, I started sleeping with my door closed and I do not look closely into darkness. Story 36. I used to fence, the sport not stolen goods. I was at a tournament and had just started a bout against a competitor. The bout is won by the first to 5 points. I scored what I believed was the first point, but the official indicated the match was over and that I had won. I stood there confused for a second. My opponent seemed to agree, saluted, and approached for a handshake, so I went along with it. I checked the scorecard and it said I had won 5-2. I had lost about 4 or 5 minutes of time. It has not happened since, to the best of my knowledge, but it has been 20 years and I still wonder what happened. Story 37. One night I was driving home from a friend's place around 2 or 3 in the morning. I live in the suburbs and the streets are relatively tight, so I was driving slowly. Do not speed in your neighborhood. Happy neighbors are good neighbors. I was nearing the turn to enter my close when, from a distance, I saw what looked like someone outside. It was unusual at that time of night. The area is mostly young families and retirees. As I got closer, it was definitely a child, which was even stranger. They were standing directly under the streetlight wearing a raincoat even though it was not raining, and their hood was up so the shadow completely covered their face. I know my neighborhood well enough to know who has kids and who does not. This corner house does not have any kids. The child's gaze was locked on my truck, unwavering. As I slowly passed, turning right toward my house, the child turned a full 180 degrees and watched me drive down my street. I live about 6 houses into the close, so I lost sight of the child after a short distance. Felt very unsettling. I backed into my driveway, put my truck in park, thought about what I had seen, and said forget it. I had to check. I put the truck into drive and went back down the street. It had been maybe 20 seconds since I passed, and the child was gone. The roads are straight enough in every direction that, in that short time, the child would have had to sprint to be out of sight. The child was gone. I went home, parked quickly, and hurried inside to lock the door. To this day, I never saw the child again or anything else that gave me that same bad feeling. I have no idea what was going on. If it was a prank, hats off to you, kid. Summary. A creepy child disappeared after staring at me late at night. Edit. Thank you for the silver award. It is my first award here. Story 38. When my daughter was little and got upset, something in the kitchen would randomly break. It happened too many times to be coincidental, and the items that broke did so in inexplicable ways. I remember one instance very early in the morning, standing in the kitchen and telling her she could not have cake from the night before. She immediately looked angry, and I heard a strange plink sound in the cupboard. I opened it to find the plate on the top of the stack cracked in several places. There were no signs of this in later years. She is 24 now, and I often mention it and remind her boyfriend not to make her angry. Story 39. My grandpa died, and about 1 to 2 years later my baby brother went looking for him in my grandpa's room. My parents thought I was with him because he was laughing and babbling and seemed entertained, which, knowing him, would suggest someone else was there. But I was in my room and my parents were downstairs. 30 minutes passed before my parents started looking for him and found him there. He was not playing with anything in the room. He was just lying there. Now he still goes into that room looking for him. I wonder if he saw his ghost or something like that. Story 40. I was walking to work one very early winter morning. About 30 feet from my house, it suddenly felt significantly colder. I zipped up my jacket and kept walking. A third of the way to work, the traffic light I was about to cross went out. There was no crash I could hear or anything obvious. It just went from green to dead. It was odd, but I had work to do. At the halfway point, with no sunlight anywhere, a streetlight far ahead of me went out. I stopped because as it flickered before dying it made me uneasy. I I stood for less than a minute. All the streetlights in front of me, starting with the closest and moving toward the first light, began flickering and going out. It was only the ones on my side of the road. I decided to turn back, went home, and called into work. I heard sirens later that morning but did not investigate. It has been about 5 years, and it still unsettles me when a streetlight suddenly flickers and goes out. Story 41. I was about 18 to 20 years old, around 2008, and sitting in the back seat of a car on the highway. It wasn't windy, apart from the air caused by the car traveling 60 miles per hour. We were between two large hills, not mountains, but over 50 feet tall. Atop one of the hills was an all-black, hot air balloon-like object that did not appear to be made of cloth or fabric. It was clearly metal, had no basket, and had a matte black finish with no reflection. There was no wind, yet the object moved like the unidentified flying objects in movies. It was moving over 100 miles per hour, darting in different directions and turning upside down and sideways very quickly. Several cars were pulled over on the side of the highway with people outside gawking at it. We did not pull over, but my mother and father said they had no idea what it was and had never seen anything like it before. My father tried to rationalize that it was a fallen weather balloon, but it did not resemble the images found online. Someone else I told thought it might be a broken hot air balloon, but this object was clearly rigid, not flexible like cloth, and not exactly the same shape. Story 42. When I was 8, I had a life-size rag doll with yarn hair. One night, I woke up and she was waving her arms while sitting on my bean bag. I know it sounds crazy and like I was dreaming, but I was not. She was moving all by herself. To this day, I avoid dolls. When I saw her moving, I was terrified and hid under my blanket for about 10 minutes with my heart racing, frozen in fear until I built up the courage to run out of my room. Eventually, I ran downstairs to my parents' bedroom. My dad came and took the doll to the living room. I was too scared to stay in my room, so I slept in my older brother's bed, which I would do when I had bad dreams. We heard farting and the sound of magazine pages flipping. At first, we thought it was my dad. It was around 4 in the morning and he might not have been able to get back to sleep. When we called for him and he did not answer, we realized it must be Samantha, the doll. Because I was with my older brother, I felt braver. From his bedroom, we shouted at the doll, saying we were not scared and that we would get rid of her, laughing about it to hide our fear. I was so traumatized that my parents took the doll to my Nana's house. It had been a Christmas gift from a family friend, and I did not want to get rid of it because I felt bad and worried the doll would come back and be angry with me. During sleepovers at Nana's, she would take the doll out of the playroom, place it in the back room, and lock the door. It was always hard to fall asleep, but the dog sleeping with me helped. When I was 15, I was struggling with mental health issues unrelated to the doll. A new medication caused some paranoia and visual hallucinations, including brief visions of a little girl. My aunt, upset about my struggles and hearing about these visions, went to Nana's, took the doll, and burned it in the backyard to end my fear once and for all. That is the full story of what happened with the doll. Story 43. I drove home at 2 in the morning one night. I live far out in the country. I was on back roads I had driven many times, and a car looked like it was coming over the hill far away. As I got closer, it seemed parked just over the hill as if waiting. I stopped and waited. It had been a long time since I first saw it, so it should have come over the hill by then. I waited 5 minutes. It seemed very strange for that area because no houses were around. When I started to drive up to it, the light became very bright and then went out. There was a blue haze in the air above the road as I drove to where I thought it was. I thought I was going insane. It looked like ozone burning. The second time it happened, my friend was with me at the same time and same spot. It blew his mind. We never talk about it now. I replied to a comment earlier and thought you might like to know that a cow was found around 2003 or 2004 with its eyes, cheeks, internal organs, and genitals removed. They found it in the middle of the field right by that spot. I am not really into paranormal stuff, but that area has strange things going on. Location 53. 540777 North. 110. 177,447 West. Story 44. I had a dream that I received a phone call saying my brother, whom I had not seen in 10 years, had died. 2 days later, I received a call confirming that he had actually died. Story 45. One day, time slipped by for my friend and me. We had a contract in another town and drove out daily for 2 weeks. It took 1 hour to get there and 1 hour to get back. But one day it took us 3 hours to return to town. My friend realized something was wrong when his wife called to ask why he had turned his phone off and why he was so late. We had left a little before 2 p.m. and the call came almost at 5 p.m. To this day, we cannot explain it. To complicate matters further, we both have receipts from a gas station we stopped at just before getting on the highway that are timestamped a bit after 2 p.m. My theory is that aliens took us for 2 hours, but who knows? Story 46. A couple of years ago, I lived an hour and a half from a big city, and my boyfriend and I were going to a concert. I wore a ring, and because of car anxiety, I fiddled with it the entire drive to keep my mind occupied. While washing my hands in the concert bathroom, I realized the ring was no longer on my finger. It wasn't of great importance, but I told my boyfriend I was bummed to have lost it. When we got home and went to bed, I found the ring sitting on my bedside table, where I never kept jewelry because our cats would knock small items off. I still can't explain it. Story 47. When I was 8, I had a battery-operated lamp that worked for a week without batteries. Story 48. It was the 25th anniversary of my dad's death. As always, I thought about him all day. He was only 49 when he passed. I was driving past a funeral home and felt a little sad. More than usual. The feeling hit me hard as I sat at a stoplight. I looked at the car in front of me. The license plate read "Love Dad." Story 49. I was in my room watching Hulu when a Burger King commercial came on. It featured the King mascot, who said, "Let's have a staring contest." I agreed, and we stared at each other. I blinked, and immediately he said, "Got you. I won." I was stunned. I slammed my laptop shut and felt creeped out for the rest of the night. I kept watching Hulu hoping to see the commercial again, but I never did. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.